Hello everyone. Today I'm sharing a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty. What happens when the person who knows your soul is actually a stranger? The air in the dressing room felt too thick to breathe. It was heavy, like the humidity before a summer storm. Elena sat before the vanity, her reflection a ghost in the silvered glass. She looked perfect. The lace of her gown was exquisite, a masterpiece of ivory silk. But beneath the fabric, her heart was a frantic, trapped bird. She could feel the dread settling in her bones, a cold weight that no amount of sunlight could warm. Something was wrong. It had been wrong for weeks. A shadow had fallen over the house, a silence that wasn't peaceful, but predatory. She reached for her perfume, but her hand stopped midair. Her eyes drifted to the leather briefcase sitting on the velvet chair. It was slightly ajar. Just a crack. And from that crack, a sliver of blue paper peeked out. A blue that didn't belong in this room of creams and golds. A blue that felt like a warning. Elena's fingers trembled as she reached for the briefcase. She told herself she was just looking for his cufflinks. A simple task. A wife's duty. But her hand moved with a purpose she couldn't deny. She pulled the blue folder from the side pocket. It was a hospital file. Heavy. Official. The kind of paper that carries the weight of life and death. She opened it, her breath hitching in her throat. Her eyes scanned the lines, searching for a name, a date, a reason. And then, she saw it. The words hit her like a physical blow to the chest. Legal spouse, Clara Vance. Not Elena. Not her. Clara. The name was printed in cold, black ink, right next to Julian's name. And below it, a birth certificate. A child. A 3-year-old boy named Leo. Julian's son. The room seemed to tilt. The sunlight through the window turned harsh, blinding. The perfect life she had built, the 10 years of shared breakfasts and whispered promises, dissolved into a lie. He wasn't traveling for work. He was traveling to a different home. A different wife. A different life. She sat there, the blue folder clutched to her chest, as the silence of the room became deafening. She couldn't scream. She couldn't break the mirrors. Instead, Elena did something much more dangerous. She folded the blue folder, tucked it into the hidden pocket of her gown, and stood up. She smoothed her hair. She practiced her smile in the mirror until it looked real. It was a mask, a porcelain shield. As she walked toward the garden, the sounds of the celebration felt like insults. Every laugh from a guest felt like a mockery of her ignorance. She saw Julian standing near the fountain, looking handsome in his charcoal suit. He looked every bit the devoted husband. He caught her eye and smiled, that warm, practiced smile that had once been her sanctuary. "You look breathtaking, darling," he whispered, stepping close to kiss her cheek. His skin felt cold against hers. She looked into his eyes and saw nothing but the perfect lie. She realized then that the lies weren't just about the other woman. They were about the house, the vacations, the very foundation of their existence. He had built a parallel world, a duplicate life, and he had invited her to live in a shadow. She felt a strange, cold clarity settling over her. The grief was there, a vast ocean of it, but beneath the grief, a hard, sharp edge was forming. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a witness. And she was going to make sure he was judged. The ceremony was supposed to be a renewal of vows. A celebration of endurance. Elena stood at the altar, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Julian held her hands, his grip firm, his eyes searching hers with a feigned tenderness that made her skin crawl. The officiant began to speak, his voice a drone of platitudes. Then, the silence was broken. Not by a scream, but by a small, insistent voice. "Daddy." A child. A little boy, no more than 3, came running through the rows of white chairs. He was disheveled, his hair messy, clutching a small, worn teddy bear. The guests gasped. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a wave. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She looked past the child and saw her. A woman. She was dressed simply, looking out of place in the sea of designer silk and linen. She looked tired, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. She wasn't a guest. She was the reason for the blue folder. She was Clara. And as the boy reached Julian, pulling on his suit jacket, the entire social circle of the Vance family froze. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on Elena, forcing her to stand in the center of a collapsing world. Julian's face went from calm to a ghostly, terrified white. He didn't move. He couldn't. He was caught in the light, and the light was unforgiving. The silence was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the garden. Julian's eyes pleaded with Elena. He was trying to signal, to beg, to find a way to lie his way out of this. But the time for lies had ended. Elena didn't cry. She didn't faint. She didn't even look at Clara. She looked only at Julian. Slowly, with a terrifying, measured grace, she reached into the hidden pocket of her gown. She pulled out the blue hospital folder. The bright, clinical blue looked obscene against her white lace. She held it up, not as a weapon, but as a piece of evidence. "Is this part of the renewal, Julian?" she asked. Her voice was calm. It was the calm of a surgeon. It was the calm of a woman who had already died and come back. She opened the folder, the pages snapping in the quiet air. "Because I found something interesting. A second marriage. A second son. A second life." She turned the folder toward the crowd, toward the cameras, toward the people who had spent years admiring their perfect union. The name Clara Vance was visible to everyone. The birth certificate was visible to everyone. The truth wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a scream. The mask of the perfect wife had fallen, and in its place was something much more formidable. A woman who knew exactly what she had lost, and exactly what she was about to take. The garden erupted. The polite society of the Vance family dissolved into a frenzy of judgment and scandal. Julian tried to reach for her, his hands grasping at the air. "Elena, please. Let me explain," he stammered. His voice was thin, pathetic. Elena stepped back, a single, elegant movement that placed a chasm between them. She didn't look at him with anger. She looked at him with something much worse, pity. She turned her gaze to Clara, who was standing frozen, the child still clinging to her leg. Elena saw the fear in the other woman's eyes, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of something like empathy. But it was quickly extinguished. Clara was a victim, too, but she was also a part of the architecture of this lie. Elena turned back to the crowd, her posture perfect, her head held high. She didn't hide. She didn't run. She stood in the center of the wreckage she had created, and she owned it. She realized that Julian's power had always been based on the illusion of his perfection. By exposing the rot, she hadn't just destroyed him, she had liberated herself. She wasn't the woman who had been cheated on. She was the woman who had caught the thief. And as the cameras flashed and the whispers grew into a roar, Elena felt a strange, terrifying sense of peace. The war was no longer happening to her. She was the one winning it. The reception was a ghost of what it should have been. The guests were still there, but the air had changed. It was no longer a celebration, it was a wake. Julian sat at the head table, his head in his hands, the man who had once commanded every room he entered. Elena stood. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked to the center of the tent, her white gown trailing behind her like a shroud. She picked up a glass of champagne. The crystal caught the dying sunlight. "A toast," she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the tent, steady and clear. "To the truth. It is often ugly. It is often devastating. But it is the only thing that can truly set us free. She looked directly at Julian. To the man I thought I knew. And to the man he actually is. May he find the life he has worked so hard to build. In the shadows where he belongs. She drank. The sound of her swallowing was the only noise in the room. She set the glass down with a sharp, final click. She had stripped him of his reputation, his dignity, and his standing in the community. In one single, public moment, she had turned his empire of lies into a pile of ash. She walked out of the tent, leaving him to the silence of his own making. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The victory was complete. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like it was pressing against the walls. Elena sat in the dark, her wedding dress discarded on the floor like a shed skin. She had the house. She had the accounts. The lawyers had been very efficient. She had even sent Julian a letter. A formal, polite letter. She told him she forgave him. She told him she wished him well with his other family. It was a beautiful, perfect letter. But it was also a legal document, a strategic surrender that ensured he would never touch a cent of her wealth again. She sat in the dark, staring at the empty fireplace. She was free. She was wealthy. She was alone. And as she listened to the steady, rhythmic ticking of the clock, she realized that the most frightening thing wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the lies or the other woman. It was the realization that she could live in this silence. And she actually liked it. She was no longer a wife. She was something else entirely. Something much more dangerous. And she was just getting started. Thank you for listening to this story of secrets and shadows. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with everything they tried to take from you. I'll see you next time with another tale that will keep you up at night. Good night.